Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this professional learning opportunity. I am Scott Mathias from NCEA, and I will be your host today. Just a few housekeeping notes as people are joining. If you have questions during the presentation, feel free to use the Q&A or chat windows. We will be monitoring the questions and will try to answer them all in the allotted time. After today's webinar, I will email everyone a link to the recording as well as an online survey. Once you fill out the survey, a certificate of completion for the webinar will be emailed to you. Today's webinar, Growing Your Advancement Efforts and Marketing to Boost Enrollment, is being led by Jose Hernandez Aguirre, Bilingual Account Executive at OSV. Jose, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Scott. I appreciate the time and thank you so much for the introduction as well. Everybody can see my red screen on there. But before we start anything else with the presentation, any introductions and any comments that I have at the beginning, I would like to start with a prayer. So I thought that with May crowning upon us and being celebrated through the schools and so on, that it was relevant to start with a prayer to Our Lady of Guadalupe. So in the name of the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit. Our Lady of Guadalupe, mystical rose, help all those who invoke you in their necessities. Since you are the ever Virgin Mary and Mother of the true God, obtain for us from your most holy Son the grace of keeping our faith, sweet hope in the midst of the bitterness of life, burning charity and the precious gift of final perseverance. Amen. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Alrighty, well, thank you so much for staying with me on the prayer. And our topic is about growing advancement efforts in marketing to boost enrollment. And I purposely used a image right there on the left of a very complicated, algebraic equation, I guess, that I think sometimes we just need to think simple and just kind of get back to basics, to some of the things that we believe and have known to see that they're very complex. So just wanted to explain the reason that I chose that and how it becomes so relevant sometimes. So the thing that I want to do today, I want to tell you a little bit about my story. Three different schools, three different approaches that refers to me from the standpoint of my family in the story that I'm going to tell that is relevant to what we're going to be talking about today. And then further from that, just continue the conversation on, the three things that I see from a personal perspective. And as I talk to many school administrators, in various parts of the country, that they seem to think is something that we need to talk about. And so some of the opportunities and concerns are, fundraising. What does that mean from the standpoint of the school? Communication, how has that affected the way that we communicate with each other, especially since from the lockdown or coming out of the lockdown? And then Catholic identity, what does that mean? Different ways of how we can identify and how that happens. So to go back to the top, just a little bit about myself. I am a cradle Catholic. I was raised in a Hispanic family, so being part of the faith is something that has been, I don't know any different, right? Prayers and rosaries and all that were always part of my approach. When I started having children, I knew that I needed somebody else to help me with that because I didn't have the support that I had with the family. So Catholic schools became really a necessity for me in order to make sure that my children had a foundation of faith from the very beginning, something that I really couldn't do. And I knew that they needed more than what I could provide in going to mass on Sundays. And so when it came to schools, my three different kids, they all started at Montessori kids. And so I'm very fortunate here in the city where I live, where the public school system has a very competent and very good Montessori school. Everybody wants to go to the Montessori school because it's public and it's free. And so the way that they approach it here is that there's a lottery system. And so we were blessed enough that with Diego, my oldest son, he was part of the lottery, was able to get into the Montessori school system. And so then what happened after that, siblings were automatically admitted into the Montessori aspect of it, and it was great. As the kids were older, the way the Montessori system works, it was great for my son, but it wasn't so good for my other two, my youngest. And so that's when in second and third grade, we decided to move them out of the Montessori system and enroll them into Catholic schools. And so that has been my journey. So when I tell you that I'm in the middle of the information aspect of all the schools, the Montessori school. And it's a very unique situation for my oldest son that goes to public school because he's still in the Montessori system. And he attends a Montessori high school inside of a Title I building at a public school system. So pretty much every aspect of learning that you could, confront, I I live it on a daily basis. And then I have my two youngest who have been part of the Catholic school system, since they were in third grade. Now they're coming up in this fall because already the same year, I am going to have three kids in high school, one at the Montessori high school, and then two at that. So just to give you a little bit of background, when it comes to a lot of the stories that I tell are because I am in the middle of this process. I am in the middle of getting information, communication from the different schools and how they approach communication, how they approach fundraising. And so many of the things that we're going to talk about today, I'm actually have participated in and I'm in the middle of. So moving on to fundraising, what does that mean? That is something that's very key as I learn being part of the Catholic school system. Part of the reason why I wanted to have the kids enroll into Catholic school is because of the faith. And so, the fact that it was a great education was just, icing on the cake. But I quickly found out that fundraising is something that I was not really aware of before through the school system with my son Diego, and when all the kids were in Montessori school. So does this look familiar to anybody? It could probably bring a lot of anxiety or a lot of joy. So this is what we see as fundraising. And believe me, I had my share of cookies and seeds and plants. And as you can see on here, the Christmas wrapping paper, right? And a lot of people, a lot of the parents that I knew, they're very diligent and very good about, filling out all the 18 spots that you see on there. But unfortunately for me, it became that, the day before, it's like, hey, Dad, I need to turn this in tomorrow. And I was like, okay, so let's go grab the checkbook and, write a check for getting 40 boxes of cookie dough that I'm going to have to put in the fridge and, give away to other people. And so I wasn't as good as getting the 18 names or more. And so I ended up writing checks at the end for whatever it was that we were getting. But this is the culture. This is what we're used to. This is what we see. The question is, though, is this something that is sufficient for what we need to do from the standpoint of fundraising? And a lot of times, this is the only opportunity that we have. Don't forget about the box stops, that we also collect and so on. Those are very key, points of making sure that we raise money for our beautiful schools. But is there a different way that we can do this? I find that a lot of times, many of those fundraisers and many other aspects of activities that we have for raising funds tend to be a band-aid to the overall goal of what we're trying to do. How many times do we get, the cookie dough sheets, and then we have to have, a culvert night for the school, and Chick-fil-A on lunch on Saturday. And so it tends to be sometimes, always needing to support the schools. I have always wanted to and did go to all those events from the standpoint of the school, because I know how much it meant to me from the standpoint of how much the kids were getting from the educational foundation, also from the aspect of their faith. But then when we have and we see some schools that are blessed enough to have somebody in their staff that is the development person, then the fundraising can become and can be a little bit more robust, right? Here locally, there's a high school that has an event once a year, Saints Alive, and they raise a lot of money in one night, and so they become very efficient at raising funds, and it's an event that everybody looks forward to. But that sometimes tends to be the exception to the rule in many schools that we have. And so, when that happens, as you can see, I'm a very visual person. So, you know, again, is this causing anxiety or joy when we see this? And so, when we have talked to some of the people that are part of the development of their school, and they're blessed to have, when they get something like this, this is a lot of work. And so you have to be proficient at Excel, and then to try to figure out which one do I delete, which one do I add. There's a lot of work in here. And not only that, when you sit back and look at it, I've had conversations with some administrators where they come to me and they said, Jose, I've used this list a couple times. And so when you think about resources and how maybe they could have been used differently, that begins to resonate with a lot of the schools that we talk to. And so this is not something that's unfamiliar to a lot of the schools, unfortunately, but sometimes we just don't have the time or resources to update any of the lists that we have. So is there a better way to do this? And so what I want to do is just kind of show you some of the different aspects of how we can do this in a different way. So if we take a 4-step approach to get away from the Band-Aid and maybe do a school annual fund, this is a good alternative on how we can get it started. So the first step would be to create a state of the school report. As you can see on there, it tells on the left some data that comes from the standpoint of budgets and so on. Sometimes, as I talk to administrators, they'll want to get that data out, but they don't have a venue or a reason to share it. So they want to be transparent with what's happening, but there really isn't a reason to do that. And so the state of the school report helps you to do that. It's almost like a brag book for your school, right? At the bottom, it tells you, what the staff is, what the staff does, a little bit of information about the future. If you notice on here, it can also become a working document. The QR code that's on there is very, very functional from the standpoint of making sure that we understand the data that we collect and how it affects our efforts in marketing. Also, it creates a place for the school to have people land on their page, whatever it is that they wanted to land on. Do you want it to land on the homepage? You want it to land on the part where it talks about our school and how you can learn more about our school. And so that part of it is very relevant from the standpoint of making it a working document. Secondly, the same information pretty much on here, but just from the standpoint of a trifold. So it's important that is uniform. As you can see, the color scheme is the same. This is one that the specific school has chosen to reflect their colors. And this is another way to talk about information about the school in order to create the awareness that, we're about to do something. We really haven't announced that we want to establish or start a school annual fund, but there's information about who we are and what we're trying to do. The third approach to this is something that I'm very familiar with. And so some of the things that come out from, the information of the story that I just told you about my mother telling me that she doesn't want any more cookie dough, using this pledge card right here has been helpful. So, okay, mom, you don't want cookie dough, here's a pledge card, pick a box and send me a check. Okay. Now there are many people, in my family, and I think it's pretty much the same with a lot of the families around, that I want to be supportive of their family members. Of course, the grandparents are key to that. And so it's important that we collect the information on my mother on this very important reasons. So my mother is not on the parish list because she does not live in the same town that I live. She is not going to be on the school list because she does not live with me, right? And she's not going to be on the alumni list because she never went to the school. And so, this card right here is very key in collecting data from somebody that's going to support the school in a way that maybe other people will not. And also the amount of the dollars that are given for this specific donor is going to be higher than most. This is something that I would use, for my brother, who is very supportive of my kids and so on, but I can just say, I need you to fill this out and check out a box. So this is another way where we can collect data. And a lot of times I hear people say that, hey, Jose, we just did, the bishop's appeal last month, and we're going to do another appeal here in the next couple of months. So we're really concerned about donor fatigue, which is completely understandable. I'm in the middle of it, I get it, but my mom doesn't know about that because she's not here. And so that's the point that I'm trying to get across. This is a different audience that we're trying to target, that we really have, in many cases, we don't think about, and how important it is to have them on a list. And then lastly, everybody wants to know, hey, how are we doing? My brother, would be one of the people that would say, hey, I sent some money to you guys. How's it going? Is it going good? Where are you going with it? Are people contributing? So this is a way to kind of relay that information to the rest of the, people in the community, people in the school that are talking about, how is it going with it in this information as well. So those are the 4 key pieces that I think would be, beneficial, and just a different approach from the way that we've been doing things. The next slide on here, it's just an overall of what's been happening. It's just a quick recap of what it is that has been working for some of the schools. What I want to point to is the average gift being $343, which seems to be a little bit high when you compare it to how much money is collected, with the seeds and those checklists with the cookies and so on. But that also reflects, as I talked about, people like my mother and grandparents, where they're going to tend to give a higher dollar amounts on there. And then, over on the left-hand side at the bottom where it says, more than $1 million has been raised on that. And so that's a significant number for just, not really a high number of schools that we have on here as well. Rich, do you want to add anything to this? I don't know if you're on or if you're muted or not.
I am on. Thanks, Jose, for the opportunity. Again, I think that the important thing when we talk about annual fund is focusing on the mission of your school. So it's more than just the dollars and cents, but it's about who we are and what we're trying to do with Catholic education. And so that's an important emphasis of what we try to work with each of you on. And again, Jose likes the $343 number, but again, it also shows the capacity that are there. Where sometimes where we ask people for, to buy, whether it's a cookie dough or wrapping paper, or we were talking to another school that was talking about a calendar slot. And they're like, well, it's $300 for this calendar slot. And I'm like, well, that's great. Some people will reach for that, but there might be other people that could do $1,000 or $5,000 or more. So really in that sense of one of the things that we emphasize in the school annual fund process, and what's important to think about, is asking people and allowing them to be generous. When you allow people to be generous, they will be extraordinarily generous back, because in many cases they've been blessed, which we'll be hearing a little bit. I don't want to prelude you a little bit too much there, Jose, about how we respond to the blessings that we have. But again, so again, thank you for that, and looking forward to more details.
Thank you, Rich. I appreciate your input on that. So what I want to focus on next now is communication. And again, part of my story, as well as we started from the beginning, is that as my kids would come in on Friday with their backpacks, they would, as soon as they got it and walked through the door, they would get out the school newsletter, and they would say, Dad, you need to sign because I don't want to get a minor, right? I need to turn this back to school, make sure that people know that you read this, what's going on. And so that was kind of like the ritual on Fridays when they come in from the school. Sometimes that would even happen before we even got out of the car, because there was no minors, that they were going to be assigned. But that's how we communicated, right? And so, fast forward to the last couple of years, all that information went away. The way that I keep in touch with the school and what's happening with it is through my phone, right? And so I get a text alert, which sends me a link to a Google Doc, where then I can retrieve the weekly newsletter, where it's going to tell me all the information that there is to come. So I know that Dominic has a graduation mass on Thursday at 7 o'clock. I know what the lunch is going to be for next week, so he's going to need to pack because he doesn't want to eat that. So there's all the information that I used to get that would go on my refrigerator is now coming through my phone, which sometimes is great, but a lot of times I have the information from 2 other kids on there as well. And so even though it's convenient to have it in one place, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's relevant to me because I'm not seeing it. And so one of the things that we have done and we have seen an approach to it is going back to the basics and going back to some of the always communicating, and that I'm talking about postcards. And so here's an example of a school that decided to use, the iconic building here locally, and they wanted to focus on how they are different from the ratios that the state of Indiana has as an average. And so if you see on there, I know that it may be a little bit hard to read, but they wanted to focus on the student ratio, right? They're at 13-1, Indiana is 28-1. Median GPA is 3.2, state average for Indiana is 2.6. So how are we different from the rest of schools on there? And so that's, I think, a good way and a good message to do that. Now, the other aspect of this that is also very different and important is how this postcard has now become a working document. This is something that I can, take and put back on my fridge. Again, as I've been, telling you my story, I get postcards from, everybody now, before the lockdown and before all the changes that we had with the COVID, my fridge, I didn't even know that it was gray, right? It was full of information. It was a billboard of activities in my house, now starting to get to that point again. So just to kind of recap the postcard here, it tells you when the open house is, different dates, all the way from November all the way through February of this year. So it even has the contact of the person that we're supposed to get in case we need information about admissions in an email. So I know this is on my phone, but this is something that I can refer back to as we leave in the morning or as the dayline approaches that I need to take care of that. Another approach that we have seen is, again, a postcard that we have from another school. Was interesting and was different about the approach on this postcard is that it doesn't have the picture of the school as I showed you on the previous slide. It actually has a picture of the parish, of the church. And this is relevant to how and to why they did this. And so my daughter Amy had 8th grade graduation last year. Some family members came to the mass that we typically don't see very often, but they're from out of town and they drove. And so as we're pulling into the parking lot, they were asking us like, Amy, that's the church, but where is the school? And she turned to me and looked at me like, are they crazy? I mean, the school's right there. Did they not see it? Well, to us is right there because the church and the parish are actually adjacent to each other and they share the same parking lot. But to people that are not there 1,000 times to pick up and drop off kids, it looks like it's part of the church. They didn't realize it was actually part of the school. And so, that made me think how many people in the neighborhood drive past the parish and don't realize that there's actually a school right there. And so, thinking along those lines, they're saying, look, you're familiar with the parish, you know what a church looks like, but there's also a school, here behind us or on the side of us. So come and take a look at our school. And so the other aspect of what they decided to do was, again, the importance of making it a working document that they can go back to and refer for information that tells you contact info, open house. Now, over on the left, this information is particularly relevant to the state of Indiana. And I'll go into a little bit of an explanation on this because really choice scholarship in Indiana could probably a complete presentation as well, just to explain exactly how that is. And so just to kind of give you all a quick recap, the state of Indiana has a voucher program, which they call choice scholarship. Many states have it, but it wasn't that relevant. It's been around for, I think, 20, 25 years. What made it relevant last year, exactly a year ago, is that the limits on income were changed by the legislature here in Indiana. So if you look at household income of 4, if you have an income limit of 154,000, those are the new guidelines now. Last year, that number was 54,000. So from one day to the next, the income limits were raised by $100,000. So before, just to kind of make a point of this, before you have a family of 4, a couple making 25,000 apiece, not many people qualify for the voucher program. Now, a family of 4 with a couple making, $75,000 each, they qualify for the voucher. And so this, it'll be interesting to see, as a test case, how this evolves because, I think the way that Indiana is right now may be the way that a lot of the other states are going to go to. And so the way that it works here locally, and again, because I'm in the middle of this, is that the average, K through 8 tuition here in the city, which the school system is one of the second biggest school district in the state of Indiana. Tuition for K through 8 is average about $7,500, $8,000. The voucher that is given directly to the school from the state of Indiana is $6,200. So right off the bat, you have basically, 3/4 of the tuition cost being subsidized by the money that comes from the state of Indiana. So everyone is trying to make sure that they understand that, please pay attention to the choice scholarship, because where Catholic education may not have been affordable before, now it has a different, story to it. So again, much more information to come with that, and because I'm in the middle of it too, I know a lot more because I get all the information from everybody. But just to kind of go back to the communication aspect of what we're talking about, one of the other things that we believe is important that to address is to make sure that we pass the information along to other communities that should benefit from the beauty of a Catholic education, a foundation, have a good foundation on their faith. And so here locally, the Fort Wayne South Bend Diocese decided that they wanted to get the word out to the Spanish-speaking families. Again, working document from the standpoint of, everybody knows Bishop and here in the picture. And then obviously it's in Spanish. And then you have a table that tells you, hey, check your income information and give us a call, come talk to us and see maybe this is an option for you. And so those are some of the ways that communication has changed and how we need to look at it differently just coming out of the lockdown. Another aspect of it is, really having a targeted mailing list. So I live in the 46815 zip code. So it would be easy for someone to say, hey, listen, whole zip code, let's send 5,000 cards and see what happens, just kind of, cross your fingers and say a couple of prayers and see who all shows up to our open house or just to visit our school. Well, we can now have the ability to do it in a more targeted approach. And so rather than having the 5,000 postcards being mailed to a complete zip code, we can do it from the standpoint of a specific list. So we're going to send 500 postcards to households where we know that the income is going to be less than 154,000, because we know that these families would qualify for the choice scholarship. We want to make sure that we target, Catholic families, that we target children from ages, 5 to 11. And we want it from a walking distance of the school. And so whatever specific target that you're looking for is something that can now be worked on, it can be available. What I want to show on this slide right here is just the importance of having a QR code. And so as you saw on there, there was a couple of areas where it was relevant that we have it on there, because you can choose where you want that person to land on. And so those have become very, very important from the standpoint of making sure that we send people looking for information at the page that you want them to go to. And also, again, it talks about and it helps us in the future to try to get more really good data as to who is getting into our page, who is scanning our code. There's a lot of good information that comes from that. Rich, I'll let you jump in again if you have anything to add on to this.
I think it's important that as we look at the marketing components for what we're doing for our school is, one, do we have a full plan? And what is that plan, and what does that regular plan look like for the information that we're sending out on a regular basis? Using mixed media and multiple media, using different formats, and bringing the information in different ways. They say it takes at least 8 contacts for people to actually see the information and start absorbing it. So are we sending our information at least 8 different ways in 8 different formats to our parishioners, to our community, help them know what we're about. Also, it's important to look at how we're tracking the information. So if we put a postcard out, how are we tracking or trending that they saw it? What message in there is, bring this postcard to the open house, for your free gift or something along those lines, or here's a QR code to go to a specific landing page based off of that flyer or that specific information. And again, because it'll take them deeper into that specific information, and then they're on your website, and then they can go a little bit further from there. So again, I think some of these are important to think about, and as well as I think sometimes when we look at schools be like, oh, well, our budget, we can only do like one postcard mailing. While that could be effective and that works towards improvement, there is an effectiveness in the sense of being able to pull a cohesive brand together for your school, and having the look and feel of your postcard, your trifold brochure, your booklet, your social media pieces, all having the same consistency, having similar imagery, not necessarily the same imagery, but similar imagery to bring about, really, this is the brand of who we are. So when we talk about marketing and message, we really want to talk about look and feel, the brand, and we also want to talk about the mission and keep all of that incorporated in the details that we have. So those are some other additional snippets when we look at the different marketing pieces. So thank you.
Thank you, Rich. Thank you for your comments, and thank you for adding to really some of the other components that it's important that we look at as well. So moving on, as we talked about our 3 topics for today. So Catholic identity, I think, is something that is very important and very relevant, especially for me. And as I continue on the story of my kids and so on, and so is relevant today as I talk to many school administrators all over the country. They're telling me, hey, Jose, so our enrollment numbers are up and it's great, but the number of non-Catholic families that are enrolling is also growing. And so while it's great that enrollment is going up, it does present a different challenge of how to, evangelize and also talk about what it means to have Catholic identity. And so, talking from my own personal experience, that's something that I, had to go through, because part of the reason where my younger kids went to was adamant that they went to Catholic school is because the school could provide a very good foundation for their faith. Going to mass once a week is really a blessing that I couldn't give them. With middle of the week, and on Sundays they're going twice a week, and so that was very important to me that they understood how to do that. They do the rosary on Fridays, and so that aspect of their faith was important to me. So how do we identify that, and what are some of the components and what helped them to navigate through that while they were younger? And so one of the things that I was grateful for is that they used a curriculum that was thematic. And so if you look on here, there are 7 themes that get covered on the curriculum that they use. And so how this helps: from grade 1, we're going to talk about Revelation, the Trinity in Jesus Christ, and all the way through grade 8, we're still going to talk about Revelation, the Trinity in Jesus Christ, just to mention a couple of the topics on there. So we have a thematic way of learning. How did that help Amy and Dominic? It helped them because they were able to catch up quicker. Had they learned, on the first grade about the Trinity, and the Trinity never gets talked about again, which is a very complex thing to understand as Catholics, it would have taken them a little bit longer to kind of get caught up on that. But because they were able to review the Trinity all the way from grade 1 all the way to grade 8, it gives them a way to catch up and be able to understand, those 7 themes from beginning to end. And so and talking to some of the other, administrators all over the country, this is one way in which, it could help. The other thing that I think is relevant and helpful in the way that the curriculum works is that many of the families that are non-Catholics, sometimes the entry or the entrance or the gateway to our faith is through Catholic social teaching. They're very interested in some of the topics that get talked about in there because they're relevant, and to them, they understand them a little bit more. And sometimes just, changing the way that we teach our faith through those themes could be a different way to approach some of the non-Catholic families in establishing Catholic identity when it comes to that. I know that I see it with my kids because they tell me, hey, there was a new kid that had his first communion, and then soon after that also had his confirmation with everybody else. And so it becomes easy for the kids because that's what they see every day. But sometimes their parents are a little bit more challenging to try to get them to understand the importance of our Catholic faith and the relevance that it has when they attend a Catholic school. The other aspect of this as well is the curriculum follows a 3-step catechetical process in every a chapter that we use. And so we invite, which begins the lesson with, God's invitation through the sacred scripture. We discover, which helps to form Catholic identity through the study of the scripture, and then we live. This is how we relate and how we show people that we worship, and how we become an example of our faith and what it means to be Catholic. And so I think that those are some of the ways in which we can help to create and define some of the Catholic identity that sometimes, I hope that my children have, in that they have it from the standpoint of understanding their faith a little bit more, and also for some of the, families that, need to understand and need to find out a little bit more about our faith. There are other aspects in here that also help to form a Catholic identity that are available, and I let Rich shine on one last time before we conclude my presentation with some final thoughts. Rich.
Sure, absolutely. I think some of the important points to bring out in part of what we wanted to bring together a little bit more is, some of the pain points in the school: Catholic identity, financial challenges, and how to grow enrollment. And so when we talk about the Catholic identity piece, we look at a couple different things, and it comes to the Catholic culture that we're teaching. How are we teaching more about who we are as Catholics and what our faith is and what that looks like, and how are we creating an invitation to know the Lord better? And then identifying this as more in a cross-curricular connection. So how do we connect then what we're teaching from a faith-based standpoint across everything else that we're doing in the school? And there are a lot of avenues to do this. If any of you have been a part of some of my other NCEA presentations or other presentations that have been in the past, we've talked about how to integrate stewardship in the classroom, for example. And so it's not just curriculum, but it's our call to discipleship and how we integrate that in a very real way. So, as we think about what we do at our schools, how do we emphasize the culture for who we are? How do we build the mission for our school and the mission of who we are as Catholics? So, thank you.
Thank you, Rich. I appreciate all the thoughts there, and just giving you a little brief story of my journey through this, tornado of information that I'm in the middle of, from the standpoint of getting, all this information from a personal perspective and what the schools are doing to fight the choice dollars here on the local level, and also, how for professional level, I can incorporate some of my personal experiences into, bringing more awareness to other communities that might benefit from some of the stories that, and some of the experiences that I've had. So with that, I thank you so much for your time. I want to be mindful of the fact that there's only so much time that's allotted, even though I could probably go on for another 45 minutes. But with that, I'll open it up to Scott. And I'm not sure if there are comments or questions or anything that we need to go over. Scott?
Yes, there are actually. And for any of you who have questions for Jose or Rich, you can go ahead and drop them in the Q&A box or in the chat, either one. And I will go through and read those questions out. So we do have a few to begin with. What vendor are you using for your mailing lists?
So I'll go ahead and answer that one. So right now it's a proprietary kind of back labeled vendor that we use for that information. But there's a lot of vendors that are out there that do this kind of thing. And again, part of what we do is look at this information. So some of the information that we actually glean from the vendor, when we actually go through a mailing process at OSV, we also do a cleanse. It goes through what we call an NCOA, National Change of Address Search. We'll also do a total address quality search. So all the information comes up, and so for example, it's all standardized. So all the ROAD becomes RD. We put on the postal standards that they're there. That also will then allow you to look for duplicates and find duplications in those lists. But anytime you're working with another vendor for a list, understand where the list comes from. So whether it's with us or whether it's another vendor, understand where they're gleaning their information, and know that there's going to be a percentage of variability in the list. The lists, some information comes from census data, some comes from survey, some comes from samples or different things they might have picked up. So if you're looking for somebody that has children ages 2 to 7 or something like that, and they were using some sample data that these kids bought diapers 3 years ago, it might have been grandma and grandpa getting the diapers for the grandkids. So there's not always an exacting science with some of these lists, but usually the lists you should have an integrity of usually within 2 or 3% of accuracy, or 98%, 97, 98% accuracy in the sense of for what's coming out there. And usually the vendors can give you some direction about what they would see and what will come out from that standpoint. I did see the other message on the lists. The word of there was another attendee that made a word of caution about using the lists. They said it can be perceived as recruitment. Again, some of it depends on the content you're actually putting out from the information. Many times from a school standpoint, when you're looking at from a marketing specifics, you may not highlight something specific as direct sports or directly into that line, but really come and see what we're about. So you make it more of an invitation to participate and see what your school has to offer and how that could be a fit for parents. I don't know if I can answer.
Thank you, Rich. There are a couple other questions here about getting a copy of the webinar. Yes, I will send out tomorrow a link to the recorded webinar, and if you need a certificate of attendance for the webinar, then there's a brief survey that I will send a link to as well. And if you complete the survey, then a certificate of attendance will be emailed to you. But yes, definitely you can have access to the webinar after today. Any other questions? Just go ahead and drop them into Q&A or chat. If not, we can wrap it up. I think. Looks like we don't have any new ones here. And I wanted to thank both of you, Jose and Rich, today for joining us and this excellent presentation, very timely, of course, with all the concerns there have been about enrollment and raising money for schools. If you are interested in future NCEA webinars, you can go to see what we have coming up at ncea.org/webinars. Jose or Rich, do you have any final words that you wanted to add?
Thank you for sticking with me through the whole presentation. I appreciate your time, and I'm glad that I was part of this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
everybody.
you, and thanks to our attendees today, and we'll see you at the next webinar. Have a blessed day.
Bye-bye.